This is a story about a time when the very idea of death was something new, about a world in which the planet had only just divided every living thing into those who eat and those who are eaten, and launched a great war that had no rules. I will tell you about a choice nature had to make once, and about the price that choice exacted from everyone who tried to survive. Everything was on the line. Life itself was driven into a narrow strip of coastline, into cramped river corridors, where to meet meant either to kill or to be killed. There was nowhere to retreat. The climate plunged into cold, and from the forest some were squeezed out while others were let in. Some grew fangs the length of a blade. Some grew a sail on their backs to drink the sun before the others. Some clothed themselves in living armor as thick as a finger. Some rose into the sky because down below there were no chances left. And every time it seemed that at last the absolute weapon had been invented, the one against which no counter could be found. Every time it turned out, nature had already prepared an answer, and then a new move, and a new answer, and along with them, an ever more refined cruelty. Among those who climbed this ladder upward were also our direct ancestors. They reached almost to the very crown of the planet. Only one single step remained. And what do you do when you win the race, and then the very arena beneath you ceases to exist? When success suddenly means nothing because the world is cracking right under your feet. This story is about a strange law of deep time. Between near victory and total oblivion, sometimes lies just a single million years. Listen, that is how it was. But what was this world like where it all began? One landmass, one climate, and a tight trap from which there was no escape. About a million years ago, all the continents merged into a single gigantic supercontinent, Pangaea, a huge scar of land in the middle of a boundless ocean. Its size seemed an advantage, but it turned into a curse. The interior regions became scorched wastelands. Humid ocean winds simply could not reach them. Life was forced to cling to a narrow coastal strip and rare oases along the river valleys. And it was precisely in these cramped corridors that animals collided face to face. There was simply nowhere to retreat. The chief doom, however, was not the size of the continent, but the climate. After the warm tropical paradise of the previous period, the earth grew sharply cold. Ice caps grew on the poles, food became scarcer, and competition turned merciless. The former masters of the land, the amphibians, could not bear this pressure and yielded the throne to harsher rulers, the Therapsids, who turned out to be far better adapted to the harsh world of the Permian period. But before these giants collide head-on, it is worth looking where evolution moved by the most unexpected route, into the sky. The harsh climate changed the look of the forests. Trees stretched up to 30 meters high, and the competition below, on the ground, became deadly. Some reptiles found a way out not in sharper teeth, but in altitude. So appeared the Weigeltisaurus, creatures to which nature did not give wings like a bird's, but rewarded with a far more cunning solution. Their elongated ribs turned into a folding glider. The Weigeltisaurus climbed to the top of a 30-meter tree, opened the skin membranes between its ribs, and jumped, gliding through the air for meters straight into the thick of the insects. Every such flight was a gamble. One wrong angle of calculation, and a fall, and a slow death down below, where the real predators roamed. But it was precisely this risk that gave them the advantage. They hunted where the ground-bound killers could not reach. The insects, under the pressure of these attacks, were forced to respond. For a long time, beetles remained soft and vulnerable, easy prey. But in 2020, scientists discovered in the Permian strata the beetle Pangaea, a tiny pioneer only 19 centimeters in size, who was the first in history to clad himself in solid armor with rigid wing cases that covered his entire body. This move proved brilliant. The Weigeltisaurus eventually went extinct, while the armored beetles live to this day, and their descendants, scarab beetles, ladybugs, ground beetles, maybugs, and fireflies, still wear that same armor invented 300 million years ago. While land and sky were still learning to wage war, in the depths of the Permian Ocean, the art of killing had already been brought to perfection, and it was waged on two levels at once. The first level, a war of strategies. Ammonites against nautiluses. The ammonites were stronger, but their young kept to the very surface of the water, defenseless and vulnerable. The nautiluses played it cleverer. Their offspring hid at great depth, far from danger. When the climate blow crashed down on the planet, the surface waters turned into a deadly trap, and the ammonites perished along with their young. The nautiluses survived, and to this day still swim in the waters of the Indo-Pacific. Living fossils, mute witnesses to a simple lesson. In the Permian period, it was not the strongest who survived, but the most cautious. But in that same ocean lived a monster who needed no strategies. He had only one spiral of teeth, and that was enough for everything. Helicoprion, an 8-meter killing machine with teeth that grew throughout its life and curled into a dense spiral in its lower jaw. Evolution decided that ordinary teeth were not enough for this shark and equipped him with something like a circular saw. The mechanism worked like a can opener. Helicoprion would come up from below at a giant mollusk, drive the spiral into the seam between the halves of the shell, and start sawing. A crunch, a crack, and the rigid defense was breached, while the soft flesh inside was left defenseless before the predator. This shows just how far nature is willing to go when the question is sharply put: kill or die. The ocean revealed the absolute weapon to the world, but the land answered with a machine of another kind, one that needed neither speed nor brute strength, only the sun. The cold forced the land predators to invent new ways to warm themselves, and it was then that the famous sail of Dimetrodon appeared. It is not decoration and not a random outgrowth. It is a biological battery. At dawn, Dimetrodon would turn his sail to meet the rising sun, and over the course of several hours charge up with warmth, while the herbivorous Cotylorinchus, slow, bull-shaped reptiles, were still sluggishly crawling in search of plants, bound by the morning chill. He woke up first, and while everyone around was numb from the cold, he was already ready to hunt. The Cotylorinchus moved slowly among the stones, almost helpless. Dimetrodon crept up. One precise bite to the neck, and the victim did not even have time to turn around. He won not by brute force, but by thermodynamics. By the end of the Permian period, even an early rising had ceased to give a sufficient advantage. In place of cunning loners came those who hunted in packs. The Gorgonopsids, the first saber-toothed monsters in history, placed their bet on the collective and on merciless tactics. They no longer needed any sail. They took with aggression and coordination. The Gorgonopsids hunted in groups of shefty-chest individuals, with a clear division of roles. Drivers came in from the flanks and cut off all the victims' paths of retreat, while the chief killer waited up ahead. When the exhausted prey found itself before him, a swift blow followed, to the throat, to the side, and the others immediately finished the job. Communication went on through sounds: growling, howling, clicking. The Gorgonopsids were the first creatures on Earth in whom the hunt turned into a coordinated military operation, hundreds of millions of years before humans. It seemed that against such a hunt, no one and nothing could stand. But nature had already created a creature that did not have to be caught up to. It was enough simply to strike it once and wait. Scutosaurus was a living tank, 2.5 meters long, a ton of living weight, and a solid bony shell. Absolute defense embodied in flesh. The key to this lock was found by Inostrancevia, a giant predator with saber fangs, created specifically to pierce thick hide. Their clash was not a quick fight, it was torture by endurance. Inostrancevia inflicted one deep blow and stepped back. Scutosaurus could not run away. Too large and too heavy, he could only stand and slowly bleed, while the predator patiently waited his hour. Endurance and cruelty defeated the most perfect armor of the era. It seemed that nothing could now stop the Therapsids. Scientists believe that by the end of the Permian period, they had grown fur and probably became warm-blooded. Our direct ancestors stood one step away from world domination. But the universe had other plans. The Siberian volcanoes began to erupt and did not stop for 1 million years. The sky was draped in a black shroud of ash and smoke. Poisonous gases burned out the lungs. Acid rains dissolved the skin. The ocean temperature rose by 10 degrees, and fish suffocated in water stripped of oxygen. The Therapsids, the perfect killers of their time, were dying of hunger on the ashen earth, where neither prey nor plants remained, only darkness, heat, and suffocation. 95% of all life on Earth was wiped out. The Therapsids lost, the dinosaurs took their place, and our ancestors retreated into the shadows for long millions of years. Please write in the comments how this story landed with you. It really matters to me to know whether it caught you. What do you think? Did nature act fairly when it wiped out the Therapsids, the most perfect predators of their time, and handed the empty throne to the dinosaurs?